The highly regarded Welsh soccer club Wrexham AFC, which is proud to be the third oldest professional soccer club in the world, prepared for a match against their Welsh rivals, the Trier Rovers, on a sunny afternoon of September 22nd, 1934. Wrexham locals put a lot of stock in this match. Even though they were in the lowest division of English soccer, Wrexham AFC had a loyal fan base, especially in their hometown. When playing against other Welsh teams, the locals' enthusiasm for a home game at the racecourse ground verged on religious. It was a sight that brought everyone together, with every able-bodied man adorning the stands in steadfast support of their side. However, Wrexham faced additional challenges due to its reputation as a mining town. Many men found their livelihoods in the coal industry. As the scheduled game conflicted with their work hours, the nature of mining operations, which involves round-the-clock shifts, threatened to dampen the enthusiasm of many enthusiastic supporters. A brilliant idea yielded a workable resolution. If the miners could rearrange their work schedules to finish on Friday night, they could guarantee that they would be present at the highly anticipated match. Therefore, about 500 miners, an unprecedented number, dove into the pit on Friday, the eve of the game, as the night shift began. The Dennis shaft, one of the main passages of the Gresford mine, received a large share of this extra workforce, which exceeded the normal allocation. After plunging to depths of 2,264 feet, 690 meters, the miners split out into different areas of the maze-like mine, ready to do their jobs but desperately hoping to get it out in time to see the Giants' soccer match. Dennis was the coal seam the miners disliked most out of the two shafts and all the veins and offshoots, mostly because of terrible air quality. Very dry coal was present in several Dennis sections, which resulted in substantial gas emissions. The mining business went so far as to sell the town's residents some of the gas they extracted. It was also difficult to breathe and very hot in some places because the ventilation system wasn't powerful enough to remove all the gas. Gas was able to build up unnoticed in certain regions of the mine because of inconsistent monitoring, even though measurements were required by law throughout the whole facility. There were further safety concerns, such as the fact that each district lacked the two required exits and entrances for emergency evacuation. The ceiling reinforcement beams were also frequently insufficient, which was a major safety concern for the miners. But because their jobs were so dangerous, miners rarely spoke up and instead concentrated on getting the job done. But a few employees started to see strange things the day before the football game. For a few days before the 21st, a strange odor, unlike the usual gas smell, lingered in the air. Some described it as like rotting meat, or, as one miner put it, like someone had their pants down. The employees were worried about this odor. Smoke was also occasionally reported. However, it was expected when coal dust was disturbed. It was inevitable, given that the warnings had been disregarded. At 2 in the morning on September 22nd, an abrupt explosion caused havoc about 2 miles below ground level in the Dennis shaft. Intense pressure from the explosion ignited the air as it ripped through the primary seam and index. The mine's alarm systems immediately notified the local authorities, who responded without delay. The police moved quickly, sending almost all of their officers to the location. Rescue workers, paramedics, and miners from nearby communities hurried to the scene of the accident shortly after. At first, it was thought that 111 people were underground, oblivious to the bigger crew because of the soccer match going on at the same time. But when the tragedy's scope became clear, a sobering truth set in. At least twice as many were trapped. As more than 150 volunteers rushed to the scene of the accident, traffic on the road leading to the pit became extremely heavy. The mine, the lifeblood of their town, forced them to take action despite the deluge of rain. At the same time, worried wives of miners congregated at the entrance to the pit to find out what had happened to their husbands. Though some found comfort in seeing familiar faces among the survivors, many nevertheless lived in constant fear and misery. The fire department initially struggled to extinguish the explosion-caused fire. A manager from a neighboring colliery with a small team braved the dangerous conditions and found the bodies of 6 miners, victims of the first explosion, 2 hours later. 30 minutes after that, a rescue squad with fire extinguishers started fighting the fire. Determined to help with the rescue operations, 18 miners from a nearby mine dove into the smoke and heat 3 hours later. Unfortunately, they got themselves into a dangerous scenario because of a misunderstanding. They entered with only the most basic breathing apparatus because they misunderstood a command to avoid a particular neighborhood. To test for carbon monoxide, though, they had a caged canary with them. Shortly after arriving at the district, the canary's death alerted the team leader to impending peril. In the midst of the mayhem, 2 men freaked out, ripped off their nose clips, and passed out, even though he had ordered everyone to withdraw. A 3rd guy went down, and a 4th tried to pull them up to safety. Tragically, only one of the 4 men lived after another rescue crew finally succeeded in retrieving them all. The likelihood of surviving in that region became clear. Burning fires hampered rescue operations, so the focus shifted to another district. The firemen's dogged efforts to put out the blaze proved fruitless. The flames exploded at random intervals and filled the primary tunnels with carbon monoxide as they grew for 40 hours. No one else could have lived, no matter how many rescue attempts there were. Only 11 bodies were eventually pulled out of the mine, 3 of which were members of the rescue squad. Authorities realized it was pointless to try more rescues and risk more lives because of the lack of progress and the dangerous conditions. On Monday, September 24th, they were forced to make the agonizing decision to block the entrance to the mine, turning it into a solemn mausoleum. The once bustling area became silent, with the exception of a handful of remaining police officers, as hundreds gathered and then scattered from the yard outside the shaft. As this was happening, the surviving workmen tried to permanently cover the tunnel opening by fortifying it with sand and timber. However, at 1:45 p.m. the next day, the mine emitted an abrupt thud, shrouding the mournful scene in doubt. A severely wounded worker lay on the ground as they hurried to the entrance. The hefty concrete and timber ceiling that had been put in place to support the tunnel had been ripped apart by another explosion, essentially sealing off the entrance. The worker was fatally injured when a piece of debris hit him. He died from his injuries despite being taken to the hospital quickly. Sadly, the final victim of the Gresford Colliery tragedy was this laborer. Deep within the mine's tunnels, fire was still burning, and the entrance was sealed once again. Despite the subsequent explosion later that day, fortunately, no additional casualties were recorded. A few months later, they made efforts to open the entrance in the hopes of retrieving additional bodies. While that was happening, coroners put in a pipe to measure the local air quality. Assuming the fire had died down and the air had cleared, mining might restart in the remaining colliery after the explosion site was sealed. In order to increase airflow, a crew began penetrating the mine in March 1935 and cutting holes in the Dennis shaft. May of that year also saw the recovery of a rescue team member's lifeless body. By July, a lot had changed. The tunnels near the entrance were finally considered safe enough to start mining again. The rehabilitation efforts persisted, albeit at a leisurely and painstaking pace throughout the months that followed. With the tragedy capturing the nation's attention and prompting a parliamentary probe, inspectors were watching every move. Nevertheless, inspectors ultimately decided it was too dangerous to continue despite these attempts. So, yet, we still don't know what caused the explosion, and 266 miners' bodies are still buried underneath.